All right. In this video, I want to talk about World War news. And it's about possible outcomes that could happen because of recent events. And it looks like America is going to head into war with Venezuela. Strange. But it's because Venezuela has sided with Russia and China and North Korea. And they have more oil in reserve than Saudi Arabia and Iran. So they're a very valuable place just for that alone. But the excuse is that they have supposedly let out their prisoners and their nutcases over the border to get over into America. And then they're leading ships of drugs over to America as well. So that's the justification to go into war with them. But that is obviously not really the case, right? You know, just kind of like Iraq had weapons of mass destruction, right? That's why we went over there. You know, whatever they tell us it is just something to quench the conscience of the naive, to get them to continue to trust their government and to go along with it, thinking that it's truly altruistic and is the good guys in the world, and to keep their support. And when this happens, it can lead to a chain reaction. One is something I see as prophetic. As there was somebody who was talking about looking at, I want to put America here just as an A, as the leopard beast in Daniel chapter 7. And it has 4 wings. Right? So they're saying the 4 wings, we see 2 with Hawaii and Alaska. And if we end up taking over Venezuela, they could be another state. And Trump has said he wants Greenland. So that would end up being 4 wings on this beast. And what it mentions about this beast that's a leopard is it says it's given dominion, right? So the beast that has the control would be this beast. And as of right now, it looks like America, right? Has the dominion. And in Revelation 13, the main body of the beast is a leopard, right? It's the body of a leopard, feet of a bear, mouth of a lion. And it says the dragon gives it its power, right? So this ultimate world power seems like it's mainly going to be head up by America, if, you know, this interpretation is true. So this chain reaction could lead to America getting its 4 wings. Now, its 4 heads is what I imagine it breaking up into, because civil war, even if it doesn't turn into civil war, we can see fractions between the government and the states that could easily be broken up, where America is a unification of 50 states. But this easily could be a unification of 4. All right, this doesn't want to work. 4 states, where states come together. You know, kind of like New England. Those states can join together. Texas, Oklahoma, and some neighboring states join together. California, neighboring states, Florida, and states like that, right? So there can be this culmination of 4 states, right? And the wings would be, again, Hawaii, Alaska, Greenland, and potentially Venezuela, you know. These ones, you know, it's up in the air. This is just speculation. But what can trigger here is something interesting. Because if America is going hardcore after Venezuela, our enemies then can do what they want to do. Where China is supporting Venezuela and is actually sending them supplies to help prepare to fight against America, which will slow things down and turn it into a little more of a bloodbath and make America look bad because of the violence and everything, and cause all kinds of problems. Not that it's going to stop it from happening, but it just makes it worse than it already is. And with that distraction, China can then attack Tibet and the places that it wants to take over like that. And America won't be able to step in to do anything about it because it's too busy. Already funding Ukraine, going after Venezuela. Because they also want the area near there where Trump already said he wants that canal there, that shortcut to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific, or the Pacific to the Atlantic. And that's right in that general area. So I wouldn't be surprised if that's something that happens, as this ultimately can trigger, like I said, because if China does that, we're definitely into World War III. Not that we're not already into it, but it might get into full scale, because then Russia is having a problem where its economy is collapsing, as the tariffs and everything are starting to finally hit Russia, where it's not going to be able to sustain itself without help from China, which China doesn't want to do. It seems as though it's letting Russia get deeper into its hole so that it basically becomes a vassal state for China. And that makes sense for the bear, right? Everybody looks at Russia as the bear, but they forget that China is also a panda bear as a symbol for its nation. And the bear is said to be raised up on one side. So it could be the combination of China and Russia is the bear, and it's raised up on one side because China is the one with the power and it has a bigger population, so it's raised up on one side. So they could easily be joining together, and then Russia will be helped to take over Ukraine because it also will benefit China with the resources Ukraine has. And again, America not in a good position to do anything about that. So World War would really be kicking off because America, probably still going to try to do something about it with Ukraine and maybe with Tibet and what have you. But while that's going on, Israel has been having plans of expansion. Netanyahu's even been talking about wanting to expand to get the promised land between the Nile and Euphrates. So he might actually start to do that. And one of the things he wants to do to ensure that is to take out its biggest enemy and adversary there, Iran, and might start going a little bit hardcore on its attacks on Iran, and then further its expansions in the neighboring areas of the land of Israel, right, that it already has. And this would be where World War III really breaks out, and economies are going to get hit, and that is going to lead people to end up joining the military because there's nothing else to do for work. So people are going to join the military to be able to get some kind of money to take care of their families, but they're basically going to be slaughter, cannon fodder, sacrifice, as they bring about the new world order, where this system through World War III is going to crash and be destroyed. Because I don't know how this war would really end up pushing off and what's really going to happen, how it's going to end up, and all the detail. but we know we're on the verge of it. There's just the restrainer, right? And I believe the restrainer is going to be removed here soon, and all this is going to be coming crashing together. And I could get into some detail about some prophecy and things I think are going to happen, but I just wanted to talk about this in particular. How this news event about Venezuela is strange, but if this happens, this could potentially trigger some other events. All right, because ultimately we see the beasts come about, right? But what's interesting about these beasts in Daniel chapter 7 is it doesn't say these beasts fight, right? So you get the lion, the bear, the leopard, and then this indescript beast, where I believe we have depictions of where the lion has something to do with England and even Iran, the only two nations that actually gave decrees to go and send the Jews back to Jerusalem, back to Israel, to establish their homeland. All right, so there's some connection there, and they both use a lion as a representation for their nation. So I see that there's some connection there. But we then have the bear, Russia and China is what I believe that is. The leopard being America. This indescript beast, I believe, has something to do with Rome, because with all these events that are going on, America is lifting off its defense of Europe, and Europe's starting to come back together and unite. And if they unite, they have the world's largest economy, bigger than America. And they'll become a superpower pretty quick, right? And that explains why the indescript beast in Daniel 7 has 10 kings. So it might be something to do with, again, a unification of 10 kings in that area there. But ultimately, all these beasts end up coming together, right? Where the indescript beast is probably some representation of the dragon of Rome. And it's unlike what we see in Daniel 2 with the statue with a head of gold, which is fought and conquered by the chest and arms of silver. And then that nation is conquered by the belly and thighs of brass. And then that nation is attacked and taken over by the iron legs, right? Well, in Daniel 7, it doesn't talk about these nations being taken over. It's they come up at the same time, right? And then when we get to Revelation 13, these nations, they come together and join. And even though you could say that these nations are fighting against each other, they're not, right? Or you can say America is fighting Russia right now, but they're doing so through Ukraine, so they're not actually fighting one another, right? You could say China will be fighting America through Venezuela and or Iran, but they're not directly fighting, which shows that these beasts are not going to be fighting one another, but they're definitely doing something, right? It's almost like war games, almost like they're doing human sacrifice, almost like they're preparing for something, sharpening their swords and practicing and developing tactics and skills, and then they're going to basically use all this as a distraction as they crumble the economy and switch over to a digital currency and bring about the New World Order, where they end up all uniting, which is ultimately like what we see. We see the iron and clay mix at the end of the statue in Daniel 2, and Daniel 7 is actually continued in Revelation 13, where those beasts come together, where the beast is said to have a body of a leopard, the head of or the mouth of a lion, and the feet of a bear, and is given his power by a dragon. and it says it has 7 heads and 10 horns. So when you go back to Daniel 7 and you see those beasts, a lion, a leopard, a bear, and then an undescript beast, which appears to be the dragon, you count all those heads, you end up getting 7 because you have 1 head for the lion, you got 1 head for the bear, so that's 2. The indescript beast is your 3rd head, and then you add the 4 heads of the leopard, you have 7 heads, right? So right there you have 7 heads, and then it says it has 10 horns or 10 kings, which probably have something to do with Europe and a revived Roman Empire coming together there. And that Roman Empire, where it has its largest economy in the world, gives its power over the unifying of this beast. And then the woman who rides the beast is most likely Israel. And that's why we see this rise of anti-Semitism, because when we get to Revelation 17, we see that the beast ends up hating the woman and turning on her and destroying her. So that's something to keep an eye out for. But anyway, this is longer than I was expecting it to be. I wanted to be shorter, but it is what it is. So thank you for watching. Just some speculation, some things to think about. But it looks like how things are starting to turn. You know, I'm not putting a time frame, right? Because I'm not even sure if this is how things are going to play out. So I can't even put a time frame on it, but it looks like these things are happening, and they're happening pretty quick, right? So if they are going to happen, all this could be kicking off within the next year or so. But what do I know, right? But anyway, thanks for watching. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Take care. I'll see you in the next one, and may God bless you and yours.